let's imagine you found the book you're looking for, right? You found one of the main sources, and you're thinking, wow, this looks like it could be very, very helpful. This is what I call how to read a book. You're thinking, yeah, of course I know how to read a book. I open the page, I look at the table of contents, go to page 1, and I start reading. Is that how to read a book? Okay. Tell me if you've heard this before, but I didn't learn this until freshman year in college. I enrolled in a class that I was advised not to take. They said, freshman year, they said, you know, this is really a course for sophomores. We recommend you don't take it. I thought I was a smart guy. I took it anyway, and I opened up the book and and I realized, holy smokes, I'm in trouble. I don't even know what they're talking about on page 1 here. How am I going to make it through this book? So I went to find help, and the help, the person who helped me said, well, look, here's how we do it here. You probably thought that you're supposed to start on page 1. We recommend you start not on page 1, but on the last chapter. Look at the last chapter, even if you're just scanning it. Because the last chapter, if it's a well-written book, will tell you what this book is really all about. Because the author is finally making his conclusions about what this is, what I've really been arguing about here in this book. And once you read that last chapter, you can go back to the front and read through again. Okay. But usually, if it's a well-written book, it's all there in the last chapter. Not all the detail, but what the book is really about. There's something else that's in the end of the book, and that is the bibliography. All right, we were just talking about bibliographies here. Before I read a book, I read the bibliography. Okay, because I want to find out what other sources did this person use for their research to do this book, so I'll find out what else has been written here, and as Ms. Tunik just told you, tons of other sources. The author consulted all these other sources, but you might go back to a couple of them and realize that the author made certain interpretations that you may or may not agree with, but there's a lot more information that this author, Marilyn Johnson, didn't mention in her book, but there's more information about the subject here in the bibliography. I'm also a real nut about footnotes. I look at footnotes all the time, right? Even before I read the book, I look at my goodness, Oakland Tribune, March 25th, 1943. Wow. Now, I don't imagine I'll be able to find that. Maybe I've got time to go find that in the library. Maybe they'll still have that. But I know that this person has really done his or her homework, and I find other books that she's consulted. And in this case, I found a paper, a master's dissertation written by a friend of mine. He's now in his 60s, and I found a paper that he wrote when he was 20 years old. And I was able to go back to him and say, hey, Bill, you know, 40 years ago, you wrote this incredible paper. And he says, yeah, and let me tell you how and why. And so we got into a conversation that had nothing, that touched on a lot of these themes. Okay, now, how to read a book. I've talked bibliography, index, the footnotes. And then, boom, then I go to what this approach does for you, though, is it tells you whether you need to spend your time on this book. Okay? What you don't want to do, and this is what goes back to efficiencies, you don't want to get into this book and realize this is not getting me anywhere. I'm not finding the information I need. Okay? You'll probably find out whether it's got the information you need if you're looking at the index. The index here, shipbuilding, employment, occupational segregation, wartime reorganization, Kaiser shipyards, boom. It tells me where I need to go. This all happens to be in like the first 40 pages of this book. I don't have to spend the rest of the time reading the rest of the book. The index tells me where to go. Finally, you can see, it's one of my favorite books. I've read it 4 times. And I've read it 4 times simply because every time I go back and reread it, I learn something different, something new. And because I've read it so many times, I've marked it up without, some people like to mark up books. I prefer to just put these, okay? So I can always go back and remember what is where, if I don't want to go back to the index.
I think they've been waiting 3 years for another adult to tell them that they don't have to annotate by writing on a page because they're sick of hearing us say that. So his method is post-it notes.
Yeah, post-it notes, okay? This tells me, the note here, economic resources shift away from Oakland, basically. How after the war, people moved out of the city, okay, taking away jobs and industry. Okay. How to read a book, right? Just a couple more minutes. The internet is a major source of information. You know that already. You've got your laptops. It will take you in here into these books and into the library like that. It's just incredible. It helps you save a lot of time. The internet is also a major source of misinformation. You have to know the difference. When you consult, when you do your research and you're consulting certain websites, you want to look at the website. Is this based on the actual research? Is this sponsored by the University of California or some think tank? Or is this just a blog? Is this somebody's opinion about what happened? All right. And you've got to make a determination. I've got a feeling whatever this person is saying and writing about is not quite up and up. Right? Blogs or opinions. Opinions have their validity, but you have to be careful that it's an opinion, not necessarily fact. So you want to be aware of it, okay? And I'll wrap up by saying this. You will have to learn what sources you can trust. If I've learned that Marilyn Johnson has consulted, a dozen books, I go back and look at some of those books and say, yeah, just the way she summarized it, I know one, she's done a pretty good job. I can trust this source. I can trust the sources that she's cited, and I know I can push forward. Sometimes we're not sure we can always trust the sources of the information. So what do we do? Right? We have to go and check it with other sources of information. Sometimes you can't always make them equal. If Marilyn Johnson says 900 ships were built during this 3-year period, and I got another source that says only 747 ships were built, and I've got this discrepancy, a factual discrepancy, what do I do? Well, I can simply report there are factual discrepancies. You can say sources, different. Somebody says this, somebody says that, there's no way of verifying it, or we can say, we have reason to believe that, that this source is correct. But you can say there is a difference of opinion about what really happened here, or what's going on. Finally, trusting yourselves. I'm going to give you, this may sound like a very odd thing to say, but you've chosen subjects that you care about, or at least are very curious about. And what you will find when you do your research and you start writing is that because you've thought about this far more than a lot of other people, you've become experts. It may be, I'm a junior here at Bishop O'Dowd. How in the world can I be an expert? The fact of the matter is, if you've done your research and study and thought about it, you will find that you've thought a lot about it, far more than a lot of other people. And you want to trust yourself that you know what you're writing about. Someone in here, I'm willing to bet, has chosen a subject that will be a lifelong interest. And your paper will get you, your paper will not only be something that you'll feel proud about, but you'll be able to say, you know, a couple of years from now, when you're sitting in a history class in college, and you've got an assignment, and somebody says, well, you know, you might wanna consider doing something about World War II. And there's Gonzales thinking, bingo. You know, a couple of years ago, I wrote a story, I did a research paper about World War II. And all of a sudden you realize, you've got a head start. So, I'll leave you with that you want to trust yourself, okay? And think about the fact that what you've chosen is really the beginning of a very long interest in that. It happened to me, it happened to be about the country of Pakistan. In junior year, same thing happened. I still think about Pakistan, because every time I saw the news, boom, my ears go like this.